Harley Quinn returned this week to our app screens for its big Season 5 debut entitled The Big Apricot. Now, I'm Cape Joel, and by now you probably know this is the video series where I give my thoughts and feelings on the episode that was, while also shouting out any comic book Easter eggs or references I can find. And before I get started, can we just say, 5 seasons of Harley Quinn, that is a hell of an accomplishment, especially when we stop and consider how many shows are canceled prematurely, especially animated shows, especially comedies, and especially those told from the female perspective. Harley Quinn is all of those things, and yet time and time again has managed to survive jumping to different apps, multiple regime and focus changes at Warner Brothers. Hell, even a lackluster spin-off like Kite Man, hell yeah, and some people perceiving the show to have hit a creative slump near the tail end of Season 4 did very little to block the series' shine overall. Now then, as we join the episode proper, Gotham City is worse off than it's ever been before, which is certainly saying something if you've been following the series from the beginning. Remember in Season 2 when it was basically Mad Max out there? The two major contributing factors to this downfall is, of course, the major implosion of the Bat family from last season. Bruce going to jail and then getting released, Nightwing dying and then getting resurrected under mysterious circumstances, and poor Barbara getting herself killing joked. Then of course there's the fate of Mayor Joker. Apparently he was impeached not long after crippling Batgirl. Damn, a world wherein politicians are actually held accountable for their shitty actions. Surely this is a comic book fantasy we live in here. And in the middle of it all we have the star-crossed lovers, Harley and Ivy, who have found themselves in a little bit of a rut recently, not being challenged by life anymore and with even less to do following the failure of the Gotham City Sirens project. Yeah, remember how they promised a big massive team up at the end of last season? Turned out it already crashed and burned before the newest season even started. And honestly, I think that's a pretty funny and much expected development, but also a pretty clever bit of meta omission by the showrunners that Gotham City Sirens probably would have become kind of tedious and grating. We get treated to a flashback wherein we see the Sirens try and steal the famous Heart of Darkness diamond from the Enchantress. The only problem is that no one can agree on why they're actually doing what they're doing. Catwoman naturally just wants to get paid. Ivy as always wants to help the ecosystem. Harley has no other interest outside fighting and smashing, and Oracle, who actually gets her logo from the comics, which I quite appreciate, is only invested in trying to figure out what happened to Nightwing. So yeah, a house divided against itself cannot stand, and this union was doomed to fail from the beginning. I appreciate how they more or less sped run what a Birds of Prey season could look like here in the first 10 minutes of episode 1. Also, word is apparently they're developing another spin-off, so don't be shocked if we see something with Catwoman or even Batgirl come back later. Though maybe not, considering how Kite Man was ultimately received, or not received for that matter. Another thing I'm happy to say is that unlike Kite Man, the jokes and banter are back in full force here in Harley, basically all hitting exactly like they should all the time. Harley and Ivy share a brief but memorable scene with Riddler and Clock King wherein they compare themselves as a couple. They roast each other good, and it serves to highlight just how much excitement our two anti-heroes aren't having right now. In a fun twist though, the simple life doesn't actually seem to bother Ivy as much as it does Harley, which I personally find very compelling as one of the major factors that finally got these two together in the end is the sense of never-ending adventure that they felt when they were with each other. But indeed, as it often does in these situations, adventure comes calling when the two see a news report about the grand opening of a brand new Superman museum in Metropolis, or the Big Apricot as it is known. Harley sees this as the perfect opportunity to get back out there in the public eye and get back in the saddle doing stuff that actually matters. And oh man, let me tell you, the Superman Museum was a real sight to behold. Just wall-to-wall Easter eggs and references and in-jokes, from the statues of Lara and Jor-El from the Fortress of Solitude to the classic Phantom Zone projector to a ton of costumes from across Superman media. There's ones that everyone will know, like the black and silver mullet Superman from Death and Return of Superman, but there's also some really amazing deep cuts there for comic readers like Electric Blue and Red Superman. My personal favorite though is the black suit from Brave New Metropolis, an episode of Superman the Animated Series. Harley and Ivy aren't alone at the party for long though, as they end up meeting up with Bruce Wayne again, who seems to have thrown himself completely into his work following the Bat family's breakup so he doesn't have to deal with it. It also helps that he has a brand new relationship in the form of Lena Luthor. Yes, that's right, Lex's sister, here voiced by the always funny and always wonderful Aisha Tyler, who you probably know as the voice of Lana from Archer. In the comics, Lena Luthor was a lot of things. She dusted up with Supergirl, she was in a wheelchair ever so briefly, she was an ally and enemy of her brother. She also got Crisis out of existence and then retconned back in. It's a whole thing with her. Tyler, for what it's worth, is a perfect fit for this show and its brand of comedy, and the show tries to put a brand new spin on the character. Lena swears up and down that she's the good Luthor, very different from her brother, because she's willing to throw her fortune behind this museum project honoring Superman. And honestly, I'm just glad Luthor is gonna sit this one out for a bit. He was getting dangerously overused by the end of season 4, and seeing him show up and be such a big part of Kite Man really did him no favors either, so I'm glad to see the show going in a different direction with a different Luthor. In this episode too, we also get a pretty good look at how Metropolis in this series compares to Gotham, and the differences are pretty stark. Not only is it cleaner and more sterile like an Apple store, but it's also much more automated. High-tech robots roam the museum party doing all the work that Superman would normally do himself, like saving best pal Jimmy Olsen, and oh man, Supes is not taking all of this automation very well. Also, in a great bit of foreshadowing, some of these robots have green eyes while others have purple, implying that they aren't all being controlled by the same master. Likewise, the triple iris designs on the front, meaning that if you are a longtime Superman comic reader like me, you probably guessed the big reveal before it actually happened. This change of scenery ends up doing a lot to reignite Harley and Ivy's passion, so much to the point they decide to rob the museum like they did in the old days. This leads to a big silk rope action scene that I found very creative, especially because the episode hits home that the ladies are actually pretty rusty at doing this kind of thing and need to get their stamina back. Ultimately, they manage to pull off the heist, stealing Superman's first Superman cape, only for the robot guards to swoop on in and steal it back. As we find out later, these robots are actually programmed to keep the peace in the city at any cost, even if it means making Harley and Ivy feel like they won, if only for a minute. Now, as always, Harley Quinn doesn't just come packing comedy and action, it also has a hell of a lot of characterization and pathos too. You see, as Harley and Ivy leave, Ivy wants Harley to know that she never thought she was responsible for keeping the spark and fire going in their relationship, and that Ivy herself was perfectly happy just doing a lot of nothing with Harley so long as they did it together. Again, a nice little far cry from where Ivy was at the beginning of the series, where it felt like she put a lot of stock in an adventurous relationship. It's also a nice reminder too that healthy, stable relationships grow and evolve over time. People themselves change, but if the love is strong enough and the two people in the relationship are willing to work at it, there's no reason to say that it can't stay strong forever. Now, Harley and Ivy's exploits at the museum managed to make them pretty big stars in the city across the water, and yes, the show makes fun of the whole Batman v Superman thing again and how silly it was for Gotham and Metropolis to be so damn close to each other, so much to the point that Lena wants to meet with the two of them to share a major business proposition. In another very much appreciated bit of writing, Harley and Ivy are suspicious of Lena as you would be any Luthor, and they should be, especially as she comes in striding wearing the Heart of Darkness. Eventually, though, she does win the two over, especially after she offers Ivy a chance to help make Metropolis much greener and much more alive using her amazing powers. In fact, Ivy goes maybe a little too hard, sharing her proof of concept to the point she ends up accidentally releasing Eclipso from the Heart of Darkness. Now, in the comics, this dude is unto a god and maybe one of the oldest, most powerful villainous forces, so you can imagine how hard I laughed when Harley kills him instantly with just one swing of her bat. Well, you know, some things never change, and for this show, it's killing AAA villains for comedic effect, a trend that is alive and well 5 seasons deep. This is also where Superman shows up again, only to be disappointed that once more the threat was solved without his actual help. If nothing else, this serves as an opportunity for Harley to put her therapist hat on once again, once she realizes that her and Superman have been dealing with more or less the same problem about being stuck in a rut. Harley even gets Superman to agree that if the city doesn't really need him right now, maybe he should take some time to get to know himself again and go on a real sabbatical. No doubt this is the show's way of explaining away how Superman won't be able to stop any of Harley and Company's shenanigans this season. Despite being such a good dude too, who's now been helped out twice by Harley in a major way, Clark never actually says thank you, and I feel chasing down that vindication is going to be Harley's big white whale for the season. Also, it looks like for a second second there, Harley and Ivy are gonna crack the code on Superman and Clark Kent being the same person, only for them to wrongly jump to the conclusion that Superman and Clark must be sleeping with each other behind Lois's back. In the end, after all the commotion calms down, Harley and Ivy decide to take the big dive and finally make the move to Metropolis, setting them up for the rest of the season. But wait, seems that Harley and Ivy's actions haven't gone unnoticed by Brainiac, one of Superman's greatest foes, who seems to be enforcing the cold, sterile conformity that is holding Metropolis in a death grip right now. Now, we technically saw Brainiac show up at the end of Kite Man, but I'm already loving the whole order versus chaos thing they're setting up for him and Harley. And so there you have it, everyone. That was the Big Apricot, and before the season even aired, Dean Lorey, the show's executive producer and showrunner — he actually show ran for Kite Man and produced for Creature Commandos as well, in case you were wondering — talked a lot in interviews about the show returning to form following Season 4. Now, I was a big booster of Season 4, warts and all, especially after the very lackluster Kite Man showed me that it could all be much worse. But for what it's worth, I do understand and even appreciate a more back-to-basics approach here. Harley and Ivy are a team again on screen, and it looks like they're going to be hanging out a lot more. The move to Metropolis really helped breathe some fresh life into the show's proceedings, both in terms of characters, but also visuals as well. There's also the promise, too, that the rest of the crew will be following Harley and Ivy to a new city. That has me excited, too, what sort of situations they could get themselves into and what kind of B-plots we could be seeing. You know, from day one, Harley is a show that's always been positively compared to Venture Brothers, and it makes sense. It's a show about colorful superheroes and villains. They're more silly but often dramatic inner lives, but also I think the comparison is true in the way that this series fearlessly reinvents itself at the drop of a hat. Season 4 was an experimental growth season where they sidelined some older characters in an attempt to bring in some new ones, and it had mixed results. This season, though, very much reminds me of latter-day Venture Brothers, where they picked up the entire cast and moved them to New York. Will this similar move for Harley offer up just as much fertile comedy ground? I certainly hope so, because if they can keep this momentum going for the rest of the season, I think we will be in for something very good and very funny. So until next time, everyone, this has been Cape Joel. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like, leave me a comment for the algorithm, follow me on all the different social medias. I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Threads, so you always know when a brand new Harley video is about to drop. And until we meet again, everyone, bye-bye.